and it's just not working. So just to introduce myself, my name's Paul Hopwood. I am the secretary of West Midlands Ringing Group, and tonight I'm with Ben, who will introduce himself now.
Yeah, I'm Ben. I'm the treasurer from the group as well.
So Joe, I'm just going to try and share my screen now.
All good. All good.
Has that worked?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. It means a hell of a lot to us that farmers and landowners in your part of the world are so receptive to trying to do your bit for nature. And a massive thanks to Joe from FWAG for facilitating this meeting and for driving it forward and for getting the funding. So I'm more than happy to take questions throughout the presentation, but there is a Q&A at the end of it, and Ben will be there just monitoring the questions. So good evening all. First of all, I just need to say, perhaps the people who live around Bredon Hill don't realise how lucky they are. And we often take for granted our local surroundings. And I think in my work down at Overbury in the last year, I've come to appreciate what a fantastic part of the country it is, not only for birds, but for butterflies and wildlife and all sorts of invertebrates, with some really, really positive thinking farmers and landowners who have given us a massive amount of access to their land moving forward. So it's been really good. So I'll crack on with it. So just something about us. We're based in the West Midlands, in Staffordshire in the West Midlands. And we've been going now as ringers for about 10 years, but the group was formed about 3 years ago. Our critical thing for the group is Farmland Birds. We prioritise Farmland Birds in most of the things that we do because we recognise that British farmland makes up over 70% of the UK's landmass. So it's vitally important. And we also know that farmland birds are one of the biggest groups of or families of birds that are seeing a decrease. So we work with a lot of farmers across Staffordshire, the West Midlands, Worcestershire, Warwickshire, trying to help farmers understand what they've got on their land and what they can do for their birds. And then last year we were lucky enough to win an award from the British Trust for Ornithology in relation to innovative ornithology, as me and Ben pioneered the use of thermal imaging technology for bird surveys. And that's a story that started with me and Ben looking for lapwings in a field in Marsh Lane in Warwickshire, and we just couldn't find the lapwing chicks. We spent over an hour there knowing that there was about 100 chicks there that we were planning to ring. And in that hour's period, we found about 4 birds. We sat and had a conversation about how we were going to take this forward and suggested thermal cameras, and we managed to get one loaned by the reserve. And then on the following week, we returned, and in an hour, using the thermal, we'd ring 45 chicks. Now, that doesn't sound a lot, but from that small seed and that small beginning, the amount of work and birds and findings that we've found through thermal imaging has been really significant. So we've probably now tripled or quadrupled the amount of skylarks that are surveyed in the UK, and we've shared that technology across ringers who are now starting to work with farmers across the UK and worldwide. So one of the critical things for us is that the way we survey. So we accept there are proper survey methods out there. The BTO will talk about breeding bird surveys and the web surveys, but it's our thoughts that these don't actually show the true picture of what's out there. And if you imagine if you were going to do a winter bird survey this week, you would get a picture of what's going on in the daytime. That's probably 10 hours of the day, and over that, the rest of the day, the nighttime, people aren't recognizing what's out there. But I can tell you, out on the hill, it is absolutely alive with birds. So the work that we're doing hopefully gives a picture throughout the day and throughout the year of what is going on farmland around us. So why bird ringing? Bird ringing's really important. It generates information on survival rates of birds, productivity. It looks at movements. Bredon Hill's a critical area for movements. It's a little bit of a migration hotspot because of its elevation. Ringing helps us understand why populations are changing. And if you think that before we started our work with thermal cameras, in the UK every year around 200 skylarks, free-flying skylarks were ringed. The work, so those kind of figures go to inform the British Trust for Ornithology and the RSPB about the figures of birds. However, if we're not getting the full picture, are the rates that are being produced completely and utterly accurate? Now, they will have measures in place about how they analyze those data, but we can say that since we've been doing skylarks, we've quadrupled and probably extended the amount of skylarks that are being encountered in the UK. And that's great for understanding population changes. It also helps play a major contribution to the studies of population of species, and it helps to understand species declines. And whilst a lot of environmental groups will say farmland species are declining, without getting surveys on your land, there is no real comeback, there's no ammunition. And because of our sort of passion for farmers and farming in the UK, we're trying to help farmers promote what they are doing for birds in the countryside. And finally, it helps farmers and landowners with huge amounts of data. So it helps you understand what you've got. It might help you go to Joe for funding through some stewardship schemes, but we can provide really detailed baseline data from ringing about what you've got on your land. So it's not just about catching birds with nets, which is probably the majority of it, but we do, monitor nests. We help with installing nest boxes, which is part of this scheme, and we do our thermal surveys. So this year, I can tell you, we've had fantastic numbers of barn owls on Overbury. We ring 14 chicks. In 2 weeks on the top of the hill, just in January, we caught 5 different barn owls on one field. So we know the birds are there. We've caught dotterel, a really rare bird in the UK, red listed. We've caught 2 dotterel on Bredon Hill. We've caught ultra rare little buntings, the first ever encountered in Worcestershire that just wasn't known. And we've ringed the first red kite chick in the West Midlands off the estate. So that's the first confirmed breeding success in the West Midlands region. So it's really interesting what we do. We love what we do. We're volunteers. It's a hobby for us. But at the same time, we're trying to give something back to farming to improve our knowledge of birds and to also get farmers behind us and try and reverse the trend of this negativity towards them. So if I just show you 2 recent headlines that appear on social media, the RSPB will say that farmland birds, more farmland birds are red listed, and upland birds, that's probably a dig at grouse moors. So the RSP, one of the biggest conservation groups in the UK, are saying that farmland birds are red listed, and they probably are. But actually, in a recent article by Farming UK, they're suggesting that the Allerton project, the conservation agriculture system there, has increased farmland bird numbers by over 1,000%. So actually, you can look at one headline, and probably most of the headlines that will get national coverage from the RSPB will say that farmland birds are red listed, but a little local niche magazine for farmers is telling us perhaps what we know, that changes in farming is making a significant difference to bird populations. There's a load of work out there that needs to be done, but we're really, really key in pushing the positives that we see from farmers across the region. We're ardent believers that farms have to be productive. We need farms to produce our food, but it doesn't mean to say that farmers can't make small spaces that are really going to benefit nature in the future. And this is what we want to talk about. And there's lots available to farmers out there. Joe's talked about some of the AOMB work, but there are other stewardship schemes, and whatever happens with elms will help us with that moving forward. So what is this specific project about? Well, we're looking for Bredon Hill Bird Recovery, and Bredon Hill's a really good place for birds, and it's got good numbers of birds.
Okay. Well,
Sorry. Can I carry on?
Yeah, carry on. Sorry, just somebody came in. Sorry.
Okay. So Bredon Hill and the estates around it are fantastic for birds. What we were hoping to achieve is to look at, and these words are probably quite powerful, but we're going to put some caution around these words because it's not going to be about whole scale change. It's about looking after and creating habitat for resident and migratory birds on Bredon Hill. We're going to also look at surveying the farms around the hill to enable the monitoring of birds. We're going to look at a really sort of innovative project about wild birdseed covers across a mosaic of the hill to provide a corridor. And then we've also just finished obtaining significant numbers of bird boxes for owls and redstarts. So Joe, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about the scheme at this point.
Well, you've said it. that's what the funding is for, right there. And really, you know, what I've been trying to do for 5 years now is to bring some surveying to Bredon Hill for you, and it has been really difficult because, you know, you don't get groups like this every day. Oh gosh, sorry, I forgot to let somebody in. You don't get groups like this every day, so I think it's super what this group are doing, and now we've been able to fund them to come and monitor and do some surveys on your farms. I think it's fantastic, so I'm hoping you're all going to take that offer up. Carry on, Paul.
Thank you. I just wanted to just make a reference to Jake's background, because at the moment I can see on Jake's background there's no birds there, but I can tell you that field there is absolutely alive with golden plover, skylark, red kite. So I can see where you are, Jake. I bet it's a bit cold up there at the moment. So why Bredon Hill? Bredon Hill is very, very special. It offers a mosaic of habitats and a diverse types of habitats for migrant birds and also breeding birds and our resident birds. It's got a vast array of habitats, from permanent pasture to woodlands to farmland to scrub to nature reserves to a national nature reserve and wetlands and a river. And well, 2 rivers converging in Tewkesbury. So it offers a fantastic habitat for birds. It's also a key location for migration. The elevation that it holds within this region makes it a fantastic stopping point for specific migrants. So we will know that in spring, in autumn, it's home to wheatear and windchat and dotterel, tree pipit, cuckoos, ringoozle. There's a vast amount of birds that come to this area because of the position it holds. In birding terms, they consider Bredon Hill as being part of the Cotswold Corridor, which is an area of land that runs from the east coast on the Humber estuary across to the Severn estuary, and it helps with birds migrating from the east within the autumn. So it holds a fantastic location within the country for birds. There are significant numbers of red listed and Farmland Bird Index species present on the hill. We get good numbers of greenfinch there. There's lots of linnets, reed buntings, chaffinch, brambling. There's some fantastic species there in really, really good numbers. Up on the hill where I took that photograph, there are corn buntings singing in this autumn. And again, these are a red listed bird. So it is fantastic, it is diverse, and there's an array of habitats that are going to be really important for us moving forward. And I think that is why it's so important. Now, if Ben's there, Ben's just going to talk about the aims and objectives.
Yeah, hopefully my internet will hold up. Virgin keeps cutting me off. Right, so our aims and objectives of this is really to kind of work with yourselves to understand the land, because there's no one better than yourselves who know your land. So what our aim is to do a habitat survey per farm. So myself and Paul will attend, have a walk around the land, kind of point some key features out that we think are positive. But really kind of what we want to do is work with you on providing us maps and kind of identifying your less productive areas of the farm as well. Because what we want to do is try and encourage change for them less productive areas. So what we want to do is identify suitable nest locations for barn and little owls. So as Hoppy said, we've seen that there are a good healthy number of barn owls there, and the nest boxes that are currently there already are being used. So what we want to do is kind of look at extending that project if possible. Also, redstart, we know that they're there. Again, they're a really important species to kind of understand. So putting nest boxes up or identifying woodland or areas for those nest boxes. What we want to do is have a look at locations for supplementary feed and mix, and advising on the bird crop mix locations. So what we want to do is, as I said, look at the least productive areas of land which will affect you least, but obviously support wildlife in terms of birds, insects and more, which is what we're trying to do on other farms as well. We'll note species seen but also heard, so then we can understand what birds you've got and what habitat they need, so we can kind of try and identify maybe areas that are less productive or little corners that you don't use, what we can kind of advise around that, because we're not here to say, oh, you must do this, you must do that. What we want to do is work with you to say, well, this is something you could do if that's something you're interested in, and it'll be a benefit for this species, that species, and then working together with you to try and improve that area. On other farmland, we've done similar, and we've kind of improved kind of corners of fields, and we've found that stone chat have took up residence there during the winter and summer. And also you see bats feeding just in these corners quite late on in the year, which is quite important for them to obviously build up, especially with the milder winters we seem to be having. Rewilding. So rewilding plots. Rewilding keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. But what we want to say is we don't want to rewild the world. We just want to rewild the areas which are suitable for rewilding. Because what we don't want to do is lose what you've got. So we're a big fan of look after what you've got and then see what improvements we can make elsewhere. And if it brings other species, so be it. But we feel that it's important to really look after what you have got, instead of trying to bring new species in and losing what you've got, which is what we do see at other sites from other kind of people. And what we want to do is be there to kind of help you answer questions that you might have, or just kind of work together and advise each other really around, what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it, and see whether we can work together with you on that to kind of achieve it. So, and then what we're going to do is provide a short report per farm, to kind of help you understand. So almost give you a timeline, if we can, of the best time for species to be seen or kind of areas to be developed for that species during the year. So I think that's kind of where we are with it really. So the main objective is to come out and have a look on the farm with you. If you're happy to come around with us, that would be absolutely amazing, because then we get to understand the land a little bit better. But also whether you could provide us with a map of your farm, because what we want to do is try and, I think we come on to it in a little bit, we want to have a look at how we combine your farms together almost like a corridor for wildlife. So that's kind of the dream, but we'll move on to that after. Anything to add to that, Hopper?
Thanks, Ben. Cheers for that. So as Ben says, we accept in some places that rewilding has worked. The NEP has shown it provides habitat for turtle doves and for nightingales, but actually the NEP was farmland, and it would have had a lot of skylarks and it would have had a lot of farmland birds. But the way that has been managed, the habitat has changed. So it probably doesn't represent the kind of farmland that we're used to seeing down in Worcestershire and Gloucestershire. So we just want to make it clear, this isn't a rewilding project, and we don't think that the rewilding in the terms of this project is what we're trying to achieve. This is us trying to understand what is already there, because we massively appreciate that farmers and landowners have generations of knowledge about their land, and this is no way us telling a couple of people from the West Midlands telling you about what to do. It's about providing advice to yourselves of what we've seen working in the region and across the country, to enhance what you've got to be, what you have and what's available, and it's got to be informed by yourselves. We also know that it's got to work alongside your productivity. So we're not going to come and suggest that your best fields are turned into a nature reserve. That's not what this is about. We've got to maintain productive farms, but at the same time, there are going to be areas of farmland or in the land that you control that are going to be suitable for something. So we're talking about land that is probably poor for crops. It might be wet, the soil qualities might be poor, it might be areas where your machinery can't access or you can't turn your combines, and it's going to work around what you've got present. Now, what we want to achieve is, through the surveys, is understanding what birds are present and then working towards a goal of enhancing that habitat for what is also already present. So protecting what we've got and enhancing it for productivity. It's no good us coming and saying, right, we're going to create a fantastic habitat for white-tailed sea eagles, when white-tailed sea eagles are never going to be found on Bredon Hill. This is about looking at the habitat that you've got and making it fit what is available. Now, you could do a huge project on tree sparrows, but if tree sparrows aren't within 10 kilometres, they're not going to come. We could do a huge amount of work in relation to turtle doves, but again, if the habitat's not suitable and they're not nearby, it's going to be a pointless exercise. So it's just about working with yourselves to look at those quiet corners where we could do something. So just one example is that one of the pictures, and we'll come more to it a little bit later, and this is again on Overbury because that's where we've concentrated this year. There's an area there called Daft's Barn. It's, Jake, put your hands up if I'm wrong, it used to be quarried. It's now a Phragmites reed bed. It's just over half a hectare. And in about 6 visits this year, we ring 20 different species. A lot of those species are key farmland bird species, and some of them are red listed. And over 300 birds were ringed out of 20 species, just in a quiet little corner of the Overbury estate. Now, that land may not have been suitable for farming, but actually for what we've got there, if we can enhance that, and the work that Jake and the estate are doing has made that into a fantastic habitat for migratory warblers, reed warblers. There were over 70 individuals in there and 60 individual sedge warblers. So just a little bit of Phragmites within a small area can be a huge habitat. The picture that you can see on the screen on the row of 3 at the bottom with that little bit of a wetland, that's in Staffordshire. It's a tiny little scrape, bit of a wet area in the middle of a farmer's field in pasture. That held 10 pairs of lapwings. So just something as small as that can make a massive difference. It's just a little bit of a wet puddle that's there with a few taller grasses through the breeding season that offers breeding potential and breeding habitat for these birds. So in essence, what we're going to talk about is what birds need. So they need food, and they get that food throughout the year from farmland. So it might be in the spring and summer that your pollen and nectar covers and your hedgerows are providing invertebrates for them to feed their chicks. It also provides them shelter. So the hedges that you've got provide them shelter from predation, but also for breeding. And they also need a good quality breeding habitat. Now, farmland provides that for a hell of a lot of birds. So when we look at arable fields, we know that we will get skylarks nesting there. The reed bed that you can see in the picture above at Daft's Barn is fantastic habitat for reed buntings and for migratory warblers. So there are three simple things that our surveys will look at. Is there a good enough food source? Can we improve it? Is there enough areas for them to shelter? And what will the habitat support? So we just come now to wild bird seed covers. Seed covers have been part of schemes for some time now. They provide a fantastic food source for birds in late summer up until probably early January and later into January. And the reasons why these have been so useful is that they have provided food which was available in time gone by because of less efficient farming practices, and now with fantastic farm machinery, that food's not there. So these wild bird seed covers give food, provide feed to farmland birds through the year. Now, at the moment, we could take you to farms in Staffordshire and in Worcestershire and even at Overbury, where you've got huge flocks of farmland bird species taking advantage of these crops. So it's vitally important, and it's something that we could think we could replicate across Bredon Hill. They're planted usually between March and June, but ideally mid-March. And probably most of you as farmers will understand the best conditions that you can use to create these. Now, these could be created as part of schemes, but also you could consider smaller, quieter corners where you could use them. So these are something that you could consider, and you will see the benefits of wild bird seed covers. And we will show you some of the covers that we've worked with recently where we've got 2,000 to 3,000 farmland birds. So this is a simple scheme that can really enhance bird numbers. Hopefully and aspirationally, that in the future, the bird covers that we can provide and grow on the hill or around in the area could also be converted. It could be harvested. Sunflowers would be particularly good to harvest to feed. Linseed, sunflowers, rapeseed, all offer some really good food sources for birds. So these are the kind of crops that are available. They're readily available from some of the crop companies out there, but these are the kind of plants that we think do particularly well. Fodder radish is fantastic for linnets. It's a really great crop. We see it used a hell of a lot, but my understanding from farmers is once you plant it, it's a bugger to get rid of. But it is a fantastic crop for linnets, and linnets will gravitate to fodder radish ahead of quite a lot of other crops. Sunflowers, again, are fantastic. At a farm by my house in Penkridge this year, out of a small strip of dwarf sunflower, we caught 300 greenfinches in 4 weeks. Now, these are birds that virtually disappeared, but they will follow the sunflower trails wherever they are. So lots of mixes out there, but these are the kind of things that would be useful. Now, if you've got shoots on the estate and you've got game covers, you will use a lot of brassicas to give some stability, but within that you could consider just mixing it up a little bit to increase the small seeds that birds need. So again, lots of little tweaks that you could have to do that. Like I say, aspirationally across the hill, wild bird seed mixes, whilst they're both aesthetically pleasing, they do have a massive benefit moving forward. So this is some of the examples that we will see. Again, there's a picture of a wild bird seed mix within the middle of a field. There's alongside field margins, huge crops of sunflowers there at one of the farms we've got in Staffordshire. But that in particular crop had around 3,500 farmland birds, a mix between chaffinch, linnet, reed buntings, bramblings. Last year, it was phenomenal to see the amount of birds there feeding on it. Now, those birds will feed on it, but if there's enough food for them, they're likely to stay. Birds such as yellowhammers, a really iconic farmland bird, has been in a huge amount of trouble. But if you start to get yellowhammers, they are particularly site faithful. So if you get them feeding in the autumn when they've got chicks, and you get them feeding in the early winter when they're starting to think about breed, the likelihood is that if they can find food locally, they will stay on your farms. And that would be really good to get into a picture of, that throughout the year you provide the food and the habitat for the birds to breed across Bredon Hill. So we'll come to supplementary winter feed. Supplementary winter feed seems to be becoming quite controversial. I have no idea why. There are some people out there who think that it's a sticking plaster. I would tend to disagree monumentally with that, because supplementary winter feed, as you will see in the next few slides, is vital. However, supplementary winter feeding shouldn't be considered on its own. Birds aren't going to be protected if you're just going to throw some bird feed out. It wouldn't happen in your back garden, and it won't happen in farmland. So they've got supplementary winter feed should only be considered when you've got the habitat to go with it. The purpose of it is to get birds through the hungry gap. Historically, we used to have very, very cold winters, and I'm not going to say too much to jinx farmers out there at the moment, but winters are changing. There is still food in wild bird seed covers, so a lot of birds won't hit supplementary winter feed until it's extremely cold, but it is really successful. So some of the schemes give a 20-week window from December to April to feed. We've started to feed now across a number of the farms we're on. Jake's feeding down at Overbury, and we can already see the results. Within weeks, you will start to see the results, and hopefully in the next video, we'll try and show you how successful it is. Can you see it? Is it working? So this is just loose seed, started with wheat screenings and rape screenings on a farm in Staffordshire, spread along a farm track in the winter, in the cold, and that bird seed mix over a 6-week period, well, we caught around 600 of those birds. And in there are yellowhammers, chaffinch, goldfinch, corn buntings, skylarks. There are a vast amount of birds that come to this. And when people say, oh, it's a sticking plaster, most of those yellowhammers are going to stay on that farm and breed. So it's really, really important. And you can see a little bit of feed along there really works. Again, if I show you another one, this is in the height of winter on the same farm. A simple procedure for a farmer, a short scrape across of snow on some stubbles, bit of loose feeding, and they are all skylarks and corn buntings. So this is a farmer, not in your area, but I'm sure a load of you would have the same kind of attitude, that when it is really tough and really cold, a little bit of food goes a hell of a long way. Now, if we say skylarks are red listed and they're in decline, there's a hell of a lot of birds in there benefiting from what we are providing. So that is the benefits of supplementary winter feed. And I just hope you can see how useful it is. Has the video worked, Joe? You nod, or did the video? Yeah,
it's all good.
So again, it's a simple scheme. Even to the extent of wheat screenings or linseed screenings, rapeseed, things that you might have that you could use, it's beneficial to birds. There are specific types of feed that we would recommend, but even if you do something, it will benefit them. Ben, do you want to come in about hedges?
Yeah, I think it's good timing, to be honest, as you've touched on with the bird crops and the supplementary. So what we hope by that is that they stay, really. But what they need to do to stay and increase your breeding populations of birds is to have good breeding habitat. And we know with yellowhammer that is hedgerows. So what we like, and with corn bunting as well, it's grass verges. So we like rough grass areas from the hedgerow to the crop, which is good nesting habitat for corn bunting. But with the supplementary feed, we've had farms that plant the bird crops and feed the birds, but then come around February, March, some of them don't carry on the supplementary feed, and what you find is them there's a current farm at the moment, and they had 1,700 finches on the farm. If they weren't supplementary feeding, those 1,700 birds that you've brought to your land because of the bird crop have now got to find somewhere else to feed during the hungry gap. So what we try and do is encourage the bird crop plus the supplementary feed, because the ultimate goal and aim really is to increase your breeding population of your yellowhammers, your corn buntings, and other species as well. And with hedge margins and hedgerows, you know, there's a number of ways, but a lot of people have cut them short. And what we're trying to do is encourage people just to give that better cover for them. So create a dense base, create a grass margin, and that kind of protects them from quite a lot of either sparrowhawks coming through. It prevents kind of foxes and stuff trying to get through to them, and obviously protects them from crows and magpies a little bit better by having those better hedges, which actually we're seeing more of across all farms now. So there's a farm in the West Midlands who planted a bird crop. He's got I think he's had over 2,000 birds at the peak. Then he's putting supplementary feed down and they're feeding on that. But on top of that, he's also improving his hedgerows because he wants to increase the breeding populations, but also provide the right habitat for the birds that are always there or have stayed there for quite some time. Renovating hedges is a good one. I think that's part of what one of the farms is doing at the moment. There's quite a few gaps where people seem to have created their own paths through to farmland and use it regular. So it's kind of planting up the gaps to try and make them thicker and increase the productivity of the hedge and the habitat, and also hedge laying as well. We're seeing a lot of people hedge laying, both coppicing and laying, as it says here. Yes, it'll reduce the birds' breeding opportunities there for a few years immediately, but then it increases and increases. So by doing work now, it's protecting the future for those birds, which is what we need to be looking at really around that. But again, if you're going to do the bird crops and you're going to do the supplementary feed, then the natural push on to that is just maintaining your hedges and increasing that habitat for those birds that you are attracting during the winter and the hungry gap.
Cheers, Ben. One of the other key things I just wanted to bring out is there is a drive as well from the Woodland Trust for people to plant trees all over arable land. It is fantastic, but it will result in changes to the ecology of your land. And in that, I would say that if you plant lots of trees or make fields smaller, it impacts on skylarks. Skylarks get protection from roosting in arable fields and stubbles in the middle of a field. They won't roost near hedgerows. They won't roost near trees because of predators. So we just have to think about, if we're going to go down that route and we're going to plant more hedges, just to think about the impact that these smaller fields will have on the birds that are already there.
I think as Paul said, it's with the trees, it's planting the right trees in the right places. And I'm hoping by us being there and kind of being there to support with surveys, we can kind of help advise around that, as well as obviously with your knowledge as well.
So I was just looking at some photos that we took. So what the photo on the left is Rumblesmoor at Overbury. There's a grass margin. There was a wild bird seed cover and a hedgerow. And last year on that hedgerow, we ringed around 300, well, I think 400 birds there in 2 months. Most of them were red listed or farmland bird species. And they included a bird called a little bunting. Like I say, the little bunting is a eastern migrant. It should have been in Siberia or China, and there's only around 200 ever recorded in the UK, most of all around coastal bird observatories. But that bird had come in and it was mixing with the huge flock of farmland birds that were provided along that hedgerow. So what we did with Jake, we picked that area. Jake kindly showed us where to go, and we fed along that strip. We just loose fed along that strip during the early part of the year, and the birds were using that regularly. And hopefully, well, we know they're back there now. So just combining a hedgerow, a margin, and some feed can have a significant impact for birds, because if birds weren't feeding there, you wouldn't get the rarities like the little bunting coming. They congregate, they attract other birds. Once birds see that others are feeding on the feed, they get confident, and it will increase what you've got on that land. So just two ideals of hedges. Just filling in gaps can be useful. Hedge laying on rotational, but hedges are massively important because those are the places where some of the key species will breed.
I think you've just touched on a good piece there, Hoppy, about birds bringing other birds in. So what we tend to find is that linnet will start feeding first on the bird crop, and the linnet numbers will gather and gather and gather. But then all of a sudden you'll see more and more come in. So you'll see chaffinches, brambling, yellow hammers, reed buntings, and that's kind of how you build your numbers up. So if you've got good linnet numbers feeding, they do tend to draw other stuff, and with the little bunting, some rarities with it. Cheers, Paul.
So then we move on to nest boxes, which is something that's really tangible. At the moment, they have been finished. So Nick Berry, a local resident, has made a significant number of boxes for us. So available to the farms, and as part of this project are 10 barn owl boxes. So there are 5 apex external boxes to be put out across the hill, and there are 5 internal barn ones that are available if people think they would be of use to you. There's a lot of barn owls present. This year was a good year for barn owls, but in previous years they suffer quite badly from mortality, early mortality. But at the moment, I don't think I've ever seen as many barn owls as I have on Bredon Hill. It's quite incredible. So like Ben said at the beginning, what we're trying to achieve is, yes, we know we've got barn owls. Yes, we know the majority of boxes that are there are being used, but there are still birds out there that would benefit from additional boxes. So we're going to provide those. As well as that, we've got 10 little owl boxes. And these are really important because little owls used to be quite common. I can't remember the last time I saw a little owl in South Staffordshire. They've gone sort of off the radar. I don't know where they are, but there's 10 little owl boxes. Now, these are really interesting little birds. They will be around farm buildings. We don't tend to put little owl boxes up where we know they nest naturally. So if they're nesting in a tree, we don't want to put them up there. But if you see little owls around the buildings, we can provide you with a little owl box. And we've got 10 of those to go out. Now, one good area for it is around orchards. So if you've got orchards with buildings nearby, orchards are really interesting habitats. They provide fantastic food sources for wintering thrushes, for bullfinches, but they're also really useful for little owls. So if you've got orchards, we're sort of really keen to see those maintained or sort of the productivity increase because they provide a fantastic habitat. So as well as the boxes that we've got for the owls, we've also got some red start boxes. And the reason we picked that was me and Joe had a walk across Tim's farm, and there were red starts absolutely everywhere. So we just think that red start is a species that we know to be on the hill, and if we get boxes up, we can try and monitor those boxes over the next year. And again, those boxes are ready, and we're going to look to get those out at some point in the next few months. So like we say, we monitored Jake's boxes. We ringed 14 chicks from 5 different nest boxes. It was really good to see them. We had one barn owl nesting 6 meters from a kestrel that was nesting in the same building. So you've got a kestrel with 4 chicks, about 4, 5, 6 meters from a barn owl with 4 chicks. So they were living very close to predators, but there's a lot out there, and I think there's a lot that we can do with that. So those boxes are available. So if anybody wants them up, then we'd look to put some up in the future. So, and we will monitor those throughout the year. So just finally, this is a bit of a drone video of, I don't know if it'll work, Joe, if you shake your head or, so this is a drone video of Daft's barn at Overbury. It's a Phragmites reed bed. This is the kind of thing that I wanted to talk about what was unproductive land or quiet corners. So yes, I'm sure that it could be farmed, but actually it holds a huge benefit. You can see a roe deer going off there. So these are the kind of things that are really good. Now, Phragmites is a fantastic habitat. It's a great sequester of carbon, but it also provides significant habitat for lots of different things. So it provides breeding habitat for warbler species, and we encountered reed warbler, sedge warbler and grasshopper warbler all breeding within there. There were breeding reed buntings in there. And then interestingly, it held swallows. So you'll see that swallows sit on telegraph poles, and traditionally swallows roosted in Phragmites reed beds. But because of the loss of them, swallows then moved to maize. And because we don't get too much maize about by us, swallows struggle for roosting areas. So this area of Overbury provided a fantastic roost for swallows in the late summer, and their juveniles will go in there. Like I said, it's a small, it's just over half a hectare, and we ringed over 20 species of 300 birds. Around the edges of this is some scrub. Scrub is vitally important for other species. So common whitethroat, which again has just gone onto the red list, that was nesting in this area. There were lesser whitethroat there. It was a fantastic area for hunting barn owls. And interestingly, although I'm not into my plants, this place was absolutely alive of bee orchids and pyramidal orchids. So there were just literally hundreds of bee orchids in this area. So just something like that is home to a vast amount of wildlife. So I'll just come to Ben just to talk quickly about thermal surveys, and we're sort of coming to the end of it now. So
to be honest, I feel a bit travel sick after that video. But, oh, right. Fantastic. Right, so thermal surveys, I get quite excited about this because this is kind of our specialism and what we're really known for. But also the fact how surprising it is, because you, as Paul said earlier, you walk on a farmer's field and you're being told, oh, there's nothing on there, I don't know what you're bothering for. And then you turn on the thermal and you can't move for birds. A recent site up by myself in Sutton Coldfield, West Mids, I was told that there was a field and it was really unproductive from an ecologist, and not to bother because it's not even worth kind of surveying. I then went with a thermal and recorded well over 100 jack snipe. So jack snipe are a bird from Scandinavia that will breed Scandinavia, Norway, Russia, and then they'll come back. And what we find is they come back to exactly the same spot every year. So that is nationally significant numbers. And for the West Mids region, that is the highest count of any site ever for jack snipe. So it just shows that the thermal and how important kind of using the thermal is for surveying. So we can use it in the day. So if you've got lapwing chicks or any other kind of wader chicks that are running around, I can't remember what I was going to say then. They easily picked out. So if you've got a thermal, even if you've got a thermal scope that you use on your rifles or anything like that, if you walk in the day with that and have a look around, you can find lapwings on nests, lapwing eggs, chicks running around, and actually it makes your life a lot easier to count. And again, a lot of people in the winter use the thermal for daytime surveys for jack snipe as well. So they record them in roosting habitat, and then they're easy to count. So you can't see them. Very, very rarely will they move from under your foot until you're about to step on them. But with the thermal, you're able to see them from a distance, count, and it reduces disturbance significantly. But not only does it reduce disturbance, it reduces time in the field, which is got to be key for us all with how busy we all are. So yeah, we pioneered this form of survey. It's become popular now across the whole world. We've got a Facebook group dedicated to it, which is closed for ringers, and we've got thousands of ringers from all over the world really interested in this technology now, especially around farmland. The UK ringers across the whole of the UK, sorry, they now use thermal for nighttime surveys. So what we do on the night is we dazzle. So it's the old-fashioned kind of torch and net, but instead of having to walk up and down the farmland disturbing what we can't see, we can now see every species on there. And I think one of my favourite stories is Paul being on one of the farms in Staffordshire, because you can see mice, everything running all over the place. And he saw one, got his torch on it and dazzled it, and it was actually a harvest mouse, and it was the first record of that species for that area. So what we did then is link in with our friends from the Wildlife Trust, and we introduced a breeding colony into that farm, which increased the colony of harvest mouse as well. So it's quite significant, the use of thermal, and gives us a much better picture of what's on there, what's feeding, what's roosting. And actually what we've found is that stubble, winter stubble, is a massive, massive plus. So if we find fields without stubble, it does have a reduced number of birds. That's what we find. But with winter stubble, because it's got the protection there, it just seems to have a lot of shelter for birds. We find the birds love it on stubble fields with either low crop or kind of weedy stubble, and that seems to be some of the favourite. Yeah, and again, it helps us understand what's roosting, which tends to be skylark. Unbelievably, before we did thermal, no one realised that fieldfare roosted in the middle of fields. We always thought they did it in hedgerows with redwing, but redwing and fieldfare are found quite commonly on the ground now, as well as snipes, woodcock, believe it or not, yellowhammers, corn buntings. It's just incredible, really. And I could talk about it for hours, but I will move on. So yeah, again, just so many birds out there that people don't really understand. And actually, when some farmers have said to me, "Oh, I don't really do much with that land, I wished I could do more for wildlife," and then you do a nighttime survey, and you say, "No, you're doing brilliantly, because without you actually doing what you're actually doing, you wouldn't have this species on there, so keep it up," type thing. So I think it surprises landowners, farmers quite a lot when we do the thermal surveys.
And quite interestingly, we were out this year up on Overbury with a ringer who's an ecologist, and we'd gone out on an afternoon, and I said, look, if you'd come to this area and did a farmland winter bird survey for an ecology company, what would you see? And there was a couple of skylarks, there might have been a sparrowhawk, some wood pigeons, but not a great deal else. So she said, if this was land for development, they would be saying, well, it offers nothing. You turn the light switch off of daytime and that field was full. There were, I think, probably 200 golden plover, 100 skylark, woodcock, snipe. So the whole perspective of surveys in the daytime is good. We've got to do it, but it's not a true reflection of what is there of a nighttime, and the nighttime picture is quite significant. And I was with Jake right on the top of the hill earlier on in this year. We stood up there, and we watched with the thermal imager. We were looking for barn owls, and to watch the woodcock come from the Aston side into Overbury was quite spectacular. Now, we're not going to get into the politics of shooting woodcock, but they're a red listed bird. On one field this year, we counted 63 and caught 15 of them. So the hill is really important for woodcock as well. So the thermal surveys are showing a completely different picture, and we would hope at some point, if we can, as part of this study, to get out onto the farmland and show you what is about there of a nighttime. And just to give you an indication of it, I'm hoping there's a video next. So it's difficult to understand it. So thermal imaging picks up heat source. So everything that is white is something that's living. It's got an intense heat source. So I'll try and pause it as we go through. This is a field in Staffordshire that Ben talks about. And if I just try and pause it, oh, sorry. I just need to try and pause that video. This is just a winter stubble field. But if we can show you there, I don't know if you can see my cursor. All of the white dots are snipe and jack snipe. So this is just a stubble field. People didn't realize how much was out there in the winter. There are a hell of a lot of birds that use this kind of habitat. So you can see through this field, every single white dot is a jack snipe or a skylark. And this field is full. This is the field that Ben was talking about, over 100 jack sniping. So again, the thermal imaging of a night in the daytime, you wouldn't see them. You just would not see these birds. At the thermal, it just opens a completely different picture. I'll just let that run through.
The problem when we take the videos off the thermal is the image quality drops. So when you're actually looking through one, you can see it. Whereas on here, it's just can everyone see the little white dots? Yeah.
And we've seen on short-eared owls with them. We've caught short-eared owls, barn owls, lots of different species. It's the reason we caught 2 dotterel on Overbury this year that we just didn't know was there, because they were found with the thermal. So just moving forward, hopefully the dream is sort of collaboration between all of you across Bredon Hill. And we think by working together, we can really help with sort of landscape scale recovery for birds. We'd like to see barn owls across all of the farms. We'd like to have a mosaic of bird feed corridors across the farms. They don't need to be all joining up. It just needs to be lined to sight so the birds can get to them, and that's really important. And again, finally, we don't want to come and talk about how to farm. Jake does an amazing job at Overbury. We just want to try and keep within the rotation system or within their regenerative agricultural schemes. We see the benefits for soil quality and cover crops. We think it's got to be done, but within that system, we would love to still see some kind of winter cereal crop with some stubbles, just to give you that sort of continued habitat for roosting waders and larks. So it's great, everything that's been done, but that is something that we're seeing, that the winter cereal crops are really fantastic for birds in the stubbles. So hopefully that's what we'd look to achieve. So just to give you an indication of what we achieved at Overbury this year, just through ringing and surveying, we ringed 46 different species. Some of those were quite significant. Over 1,006 birds were encountered. 261 of them were red listed. 111 of those were skylarks. 14 barn owl chicks. We ringed some phenomenal species. The picture that you can see on the left in the stubble is a dotterel. Never recorded in Worcestershire as a ringing encounter, and we caught 2. Obviously, woodcock numbers have been brilliant, and the final one is just a picture of a snipe's tail. What a beautiful, beautiful plumage these birds have. So the work that we're doing hopefully has provided Jake and Penelope at the stake with some really tangible data. And we just hope we can sort of replicate, probably not on the level that we've done this year, but to give you an indication of what is across your farms. So that's about it. Thank you so much for listening to a couple of townies from Birmingham drone on for an hour. Like I said, we're not going to come and tell you what you're doing is wrong. That's not what this is about. This is purely about working with you and just making some tweaks to those quiet corners just to enhance Bredon Hill for nature moving forward.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Ben. Oh, Adrian's straight in there with the question. Go for it, Adrian.
Well, I'm just very keen that, to get involved with the thermal imaging, because we have one of the best sites for jack snipe. But I guess we probably, when we see 25, we're only seeing a small proportion of them. So it would be very good to have them surveyed at night.
You can probably at least double it.
Yeah. So that's one thing. But we are finding that we're getting far fewer flocks of winter finches, even though we've got, we're ostensibly doing the things that we ought to be doing. It's possible that they're all being lured up to the top of the hill by Jake. But Jake is now managing our land as well, so that we'll be cooperating through him. And we certainly want to get involved. And Fergus came and saw us the other day. Sadly, I couldn't meet him myself because I got involved in another meeting which went on too long. But we are certainly interested. A lot of our land, though, is grassland, and we're interested in what we can do there. We've started now doing regenerative agriculture in our grassland by mob grazing, and this means having the thing much longer for a lot of the time. But we have got river meadows and wet areas, and again, we're seeing declines in things like curlew and redshank on those. So we're interested in extending the idea of farmland not only to arable land, but to grassland.
Yeah, we find quite a good number of species on grassland, especially grazed, where we tend to find a good number of skylark and woodcock using that ground as well. So it's quite interesting to compare farming methods and fields. So it's you will have quite a bit on, and a lot of thrushes like grassland. So you'll find that you'll have a lot of thrushes within your grass pastures as well.
And Adrian, Fergus is part of our group, so he's got access to thermal imagery. So
right.
No problem at all in Fergus and us coming out to have a look with it. So we can definitely take that further forward.
Good, thank you.
Brilliant.
I'm just looking at the chat.
Yeah, there's no other questions on the chat. It's just
I was just reading Jake's. Jake, I think you know my position. I think you're fighting a losing battle with educating the public. I think there's a complete perception that they know best, that having their dogs off leads is a good thing. Landmines probably are a pretty good suggestion, razor wire, fences. But I'm all for doing something about it, Jake, if we can engage with people. I don't think they read the signs, although I think they've been done brilliantly. I don't think people listen. There are some sort of remedial things that we could consider. I still think that dogs off leads in the breeding season for both lambs and birds, it's going to come to a head. And I think, you know, I just don't know the way forward. I don't know what the law is in relation to your permissive paths. Can you insist that people have dogs on the lead? But how do you police it?
I think Chris Millward from Bibby's farm in West Mids, he's looking at this and he's building a Birmingham-based farm cluster. So it might be worth looking at, because they're looking at similar issues, and it may be something as a cluster that we share best practice and maybe look at testing things that may or may not work, and then just kind of work together to see if we can kind of come with something that might work, even if it's not all the time, but it improves the percentage of dogs on leads or whatever. And maybe linking in with I don't know what your links are with the local police there, but maybe that's something me and Hoppy can help with in terms of doing that, and maybe having some surgeries where we invite community, or we go, or farmers go to the local community police meetings and kind of discuss with them issues they might have. There's quite a few ins, so maybe we can support with that maybe.
I think the best way going forward, Joe, is if I share with you our sort of annual report that you can share with the group to give them a better in-depth details of what we're doing, and then any requests for the owls, and then when we start to get into surveys, we'd like to probably start that in the next few months just to get out there. So and then we can provide contact details, but we're more than happy to be on the phone or at the end of an email just to discuss these things. I just hope it's useful to people.
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
If we could ask everyone to kind of submit a map of their area, ideally with their farm, the field names on, because when we're trying to talk about fields, or it's good to be able to just say, oh, the field with one tree or whatever, that kind of field name, then we can kind of discuss. And then if you mark down your less productive fields, which you would be happy to, or if you've got AB12 or AB9, or you've got feed or plots there already, maybe just write that down on a note for us so we can kind of understand. And if, as Adrian said, if he's not finding the finches there or less, then we can have a look at that, because there may be a number of reasons for that.
Joe, I read your thing about the Severn Trent Biodiversity Fund for hedge laying.
Yeah,
Ben is really close with Zara at Severn Trent, so that's something we could really sort of say we think this is a great idea moving forward for part of this project. If we tied it in with the bird project, you know, feel free to mention us for the sort of hedge restoration, and say there's something we're supporting for Farmland Birds. I'm sure that'll go a long way with Zara there.
Well, Zara's now left, unfortunately, so I'm dealing with Bryony, but they're very keen on sort of multi-partnership, sort of collaboration things. I mean, I just threw in Hedges because you were talking about Hedges at the time, but it seems like that's quite an expensive thing, restoring hedges. So if it could be something else, it could be hedges with margins, it could be wetlands, but we've also got flourishing floodplains that are restoring wetlands in our area as well. So there's extra funding there for that. It was just an idea, but if you think as a whole that restoration of hedges is a good one to put forward, I can easily sort of drum up an application to them. I spoke with them today about it. So, all I need is the thumbs up from a few. Yeah. And I'm away. But yeah, I think sort of if everybody's happy for me to share an email or a number with the guys from West Midland Bird Ringing Group, Ben and Paul, they can then sort of make sort of headway as to setting up a site visit with you all. Because I think the sooner the better, for getting bird boxes up, especially.
Yeah. We're likely to have missed it for the barn owls this year, Joe.
Yeah.
Probably, but the red starts definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is about the ringing demos. That's something we can look at more than happy for anybody who wants to come and see what we're doing when we start to catch to come out with us. We love people to come out and to have a look. Jake's been, Penelope has been, Joe's been, Pam's been. So you're more than welcome to come and see what we're up to as well.
Yeah, they're really good fun. Really good fun. Bit early for me. You'll have to travel an hour to get to you.
It's a lot easier in the winter, Joe. It's just colder.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions at all that they want to ask Paul or Ben? I think they're all hungry.
I think as soon as we get the maps, we can start looking at arranging dates, times, just to come out, have a look around, and start doing these surveys for people and working with them to achieve what we're going to try and do.
Okay.
The map that we gave, I mean, a map to Fergus will get to you. Is that?
Yeah, that we'll speak to Ferg and get that.
I mean, we have given him a map.
That's fine.
If anybody's got a land app map, I've set up a fair few of those. You can just put some dots all over it, and that's very easily shareable as a sort of quick resource to share with the guys. Otherwise, yeah, we'll find something to get to you so you can take that forward.
Yeah, we'd be very keen to crack on as soon as possible. That's me.
Oh.
I did that without even moving my lips. Amazing.
I was looking around thinking, who's talking? Brilliant.
And again, if you're aware of where your owls are, then that would be helpful as well. Because little owls, if they're in trees nesting, we wouldn't put boxes up for them, because what we want, they're being successful, and we don't want to encourage jackdaws or whatever to the area they're in. So if you've got them near buildings and just need a bit more protection, and you know where they are, let us know and we can kind of support them.
Fantastic. Okay.
Jake's got his hand up, Joe.
Yes, he has. I'm just going to stop the recording, actually.